Welcome to College Smart Radio, helping you understand the true cost of college and tackle the runaway costs of financing a college education. College Smart Radio is hosted by Beatrice Schultz, a certified financial planner and founder of Westface College Planning. Now, here's your host for College Smart Radio, Beatrice Schultz.
The search for the right college can be overwhelming, and the choice is further complicated by the many college ranking publications. On today's College Smart Radio program, we're going to discuss a recently released college rating report that tells you one thing the other rankings don't: which universities are making sure their students learn what they need to know. It's designed to help you decide whether the colleges you're considering prepare their graduates to succeed after graduation. Hi, I'm Beatrice Schultz. Welcome to our weekly show, College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of a college education. Our show is about bringing up-to-date and practical advice to parents who are dealing with the cost of a college education for their kids. With some private schools costing over $60,000 a year, a UC costing close to $35,000, and a California State University running $25,000, parents need more help than ever. We bring you that help by sharing ways to pay less, tapping into financial aid, and prioritizing your source of funds to make sure you get through the most expensive years of your life. Based on my own education and experience, I share my insights with you week in and week out. I'm a certified financial planner and the owner of the San Carlos-based Westface College business named Westface College Planning. I host educational workshops on college planning and consult with parents on a daily basis. And I bring in experts in many areas of the college process. From counselors, financial aid officers, student coaches, parents, and even students, you'll learn firsthand the ins and outs of how to pay for college and survive financially. In addition to our show, you can find lots of powerful information at our website, collegesmartradio.com. We have many articles with up-to-date information on navigating the waters of paying for the runaway costs of college. We have a monthly e-newsletter full of content about college planning. We also have posted a glossary of key terms used in the world of college planning, terms like total cost of attendance, FAFSA, net price calculator, and so forth. And we have a link to our free community parent workshops and webinars that I host to teach parents about how to pay for college and how the financial aid system really works. Let's get started with today's show. My guest on today's College Smart Radio program is Dr. Michael Poliakoff, the Vice President of Policy for the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. Dr. Poliakoff has served as Vice President for Academic Affairs and Research at the University of Colorado and in senior roles at the National Endowment for the Humanities, the National Council on Teacher Quality, the American Academy for Liberal Education, and the Pennsylvania Department of Education. He's also taught at many distinguished universities and authored numerous books and articles in classical studies and education policy. Michael's joining us via phone today from Washington, D.C. Hi, Michael. Welcome to College Smart Radio.
Hi, Beatrice. I'm honored to be on your show. You're doing so much good in helping students and their families make judicious choices that will prepare them for career and community. Delighted to help with this effort.
Thank you so much, and thanks so much for joining us. So let's start a little bit. I do want to talk about this report, but why don't you share a little bit for our audience about who the American Council of Trustees and Alumni are, or what your organization does?
The American Council of Trustees and Alumni, or ACTA for short, is a Washington-based nonprofit. We work with a network of about 15,000 college trustees and regents all around the country, helping them to understand the crucial role that they have in steering their institutions. And we stress 3 points in particular: academic standards, academic freedom, and the accountability of colleges and universities to serve their students and to serve the public.
I think it's really valuable to share with our audience and for consumers, parents, students, taxpayers to kind of understand how that works. So I really appreciate that you're going to share some of your knowledge with us today. Let's talk a little bit about this report as well as its ranking that you've put together and that you've published, and we'll talk about kind of the different core ideas of what's important that you're using to rank the colleges. So tell me a little bit about the report and how you get the information.
About 5 years ago, we became really quite frustrated, as I'm sure you are, at the kinds of tools that were available for students and parents to make choices. We wanted to see information that was not based on prestige or wealth or status, but really what was going on in the most important exercise of a college or university. What will students learn? That's indeed the title of this study. What will they learn? And so we began to scour catalogs and look online at syllabi and course material and address the question, not what colleges and universities say they want all students to acquire. There's always grand rhetoric about how it will prepare them for practically everything, but what they actually require. Not talking the talk, but walking the walk. If they say they want all students to be able to communicate well, we ask, do you have an expository writing requirement? Not a recommendation, but a requirement. If you talk about quantitative literacy, do you require real college-level mathematics? If you talk about citizenship, do you require a course in American history or government? And so we built this project around those 7 core requirements, not distributional menu choices, not the cafeteria line of abstruse and niche and recherche courses, but those foundational subjects that every college graduate ought to have.
And how did now were you asking colleges to report this information? Is it publicly available information, or how did the colleges respond to this type of questioning in order and understanding that they were going to be ranked based on it or rated based on it?
It's not a ranking system. It is a rating. We give grades A through F, and I will say we don't do grade inflation at ACTA. There were, of the nearly 1,100 colleges and universities, there were only 22 A's, and there were quite a number of C's, D's, and F's, but we'll come back to that in a moment. We worked independently of the colleges and universities. That's to say, we used the publicly available information that any student or parent or taxpayer or policymaker would have. And we do regard the college catalog as a statement that's just the side of contractual. What does the college promise? And on numerous occasions, we back that up with other information like online syllabi or other things that would illuminate what that course description was saying. But to answer your question, no, we went for what the consumer or what the taxpayer would be able to find.
So let's talk a little bit about what were the major findings.
Well, I'm afraid they're not very good. They do not speak well for the link between rhetoric and reality. As I said before, although we see over and over again these grand mission statements about learning all the skills for global citizenship and meeting the challenges of career. In fact, we found that only about 18% of the schools had a requirement for American history or government. So students really do leave, and we've actually surveyed the students as well, with a very high level of illiteracy about the workings of government. They're civically disempowered. In this global economic crisis, only 3% of the institutions had a requirement for economics, although practically every institution talks about the importance of diversity and multiculturalism, and they are indeed very important. 13.5%, that's all, required even intermediate level foreign language proficiency. In other words, there's a lot of talking the talk, but not a lot of walking the walk and doing the real work of learning another culture's language. The nation is desperate for graduates with real proficiency in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math, and yet 40% of the schools we looked at did not have a real college-level math requirement. So this was really quite alarming. When we hear from employers, they talk constantly about the necessity of having graduates, regardless of major, who have these foundational skills, who've learned how to communicate clearly, solve complex problems, think critically, all the things that come out of these core disciplines, and yet they're not being required.
If you've just joined us, my guest on today's College Smart Radio program is Dr. Michael Poliakoff, who's the Vice President of Policy for the American Council of Trustees and Alumni. We're talking about the What Will They Learn ratings report that was just published this week, and a link to that website is available on my website. We're going to take a break right now, but you're right with us with College Smart Radio, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
For more information on today's topic, visit collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. College Smart Radio continues in moments on AM 1220 KDOW. Contact Beatrice Schultz at collegesmartradio.com or call 650-587-1559. Now back to College Smart Radio with your host Beatrice Schultz on AM 1220 KDOW.
Welcome back to College Smart Radio, where we help you tackle the runaway costs of college. I'm Beatrice Schultz. We all know that college is expensive and will most likely be some of the most costly years for a family. Understanding how to navigate the college costs is a smart thing to know. To help families be on this radio show, I host community workshops live and via webinar several times a month that explain the costs of various colleges, how the financial aid system works, and things to consider to prepare yourself for this tremendous expense. To learn more and reserve your seat, go to my website, collegesmartradio.com. If you've just joined us, I've been talking with my guest, Dr. Michael Poliakoff, who's the Vice President of Policy for the American Council of Trustees and Alumni in Washington, D.C. We're talking about a recent report that is a ratings report for colleges called What Will They Learn? Michael, we were just talking a little bit about what the major findings were in the report, and I don't know if I cut you off before we got to, if you had a chance to share with you kind of the primary findings, or if we want to go on and talk a little bit about, unfortunately, what some of the missings that you found in the curriculum.
We might just add a little bit more and begin to look towards the kinds of choices that students and their families will want to make in selecting a college or university. And a lot of that really is around whether this is a serious academic environment. Those college years are incredibly expensive, as you've pointed out so eloquently, and they are an incredibly rare opportunity. In many cases, sadly enough, students are going to be paying for them for a long time after college. They need to choose very wisely. And so, the recreation facilities and the climbing walls and the dining halls and all the other glitz will pass by. What will be left is whether or not there's a serious foundational education that prepares the student, the graduate, for career and community. We know from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that a person between the ages of 18 and 46 will change jobs over 11 times. Now, some of those will be small changes, but some of them will be career shifts. And so, simply thinking that getting a narrow preparation in a particular major or professional program is enough is just wrong. It's wrong to think that a student can just fill up the rest of the time with silly elective courses that don't really build those foundational skills. In the course of doing this report, we, as you can imagine, look at tens of thousands of pages of college catalogs. Here are some of the things that students can use to fill distribution requirements at different colleges and universities. Instead of a United States history course or government course, you can take horror films and American culture, or you can take America through baseball. At another school, you could take history of hip-hop. At another one, for your global diversity requirement, you could take the sociology of the living dead, zombie films. Zombies and vampires, I must say, are quite popular this year around. There are courses on Harry Potter. Now, I'm not saying these things aren't interesting. Of course they're interesting. But are they sustaining? In fact, they make me think of a nutritious meal or a non-nutritious meal. You can eat all kinds of desserts, but that's not going to sustain you. And too many of our colleges and universities, instead of having the disciplined thinking that comes from a faculty and administration that's come together to answer the question, what does it mean to be educated, have put out this weird menu of odd choices that students can take. They're not giving them the kind of guidance and structure that they need and for which they will pay a price later on.
It's a good analogy that you use the choices of the foods that you eat. So are you seeing, or do you know, or can you find out from your research, are students putting together or choosing some of that core themselves? So maybe it's not a prerequisite at the college. I mean, is it crucial that the college explicitly paved this pathway for the students for success?
It was a remarkable finding in the 2011 publication Academically Adrift that rather rocked the nation by Richard Aram and Josipa Roxa, that in terms of cognitive gain, that is to say, in the most basic, simple terms, how much smarter a student gets over 4 years, that there was more variation within each institution than between institutions. In other words, what our parents always told us, that it doesn't matter where you go, but how hard you work and how rigorous the courses are that you take, is absolutely true and demonstrated by very good and very well documented research findings. And that's really the kicker, that a family could invest $250,000 in an elite institution, and if the student has not made good choices, that is wasted money. And there really is a sort of a morality play to all of this, that the authors of this study did a follow-up to see what happened to the 2,300 students that they had tracked. Those who showed, as one would expect, the highest levels of cognitive gain were the ones that were employed, that were living on their own, that had the least level of credit card debt. The ones in the bottom quintile were the ones who are really suffering now, and I dare say their families as well, because so many of them have just had to move back in rather than starting life on their own. These are choices that really matter, and I do have to say shame on those colleges and universities that take the easy way out, that give those glitzy, appealing, pop-sounding courses as choices rather than helping the students in their role as academic advisors by giving them firm requirements for which the students will thank them later on.
And it really is a shame, because that shame, like you said, is that they may not get the job when they graduate or have the skills that they want. But it's also a shame that it becomes a box that has to be checked off to say, okay, I have a college degree, as opposed to learning in the college. And when you mentioned the point about the STEM schools, for sure that is the traditional. If we can get more people to take the science and technology, engineering, math, we know that those are skills that you have to learn. And when from the first day you start a 4-year college, from when you graduate, you're going to learn something if you graduate. It's harder sometimes to measure some of the more liberal sciences. Not to say, though, I think many of those STEM kids still would not be able to answer some of those questions that we talked about our Abraham Lincoln's iconic speech, the Gettysburg Address, or so much of history that some of those kids aren't even taking. It's not required in their core curriculum. And in fact, wasn't even in mine when I took my engineering degree 30 years ago. So we're seeing, a downgrade even in the landscape, but it's become so much more critical because it's so much more expensive now. And when you say that $250,000 is not unheard of to pay for an education, and I think you said one statistic that said that many of these graduates are not showing any cognitive growth over the 4 years. It's just horrifying.
It's so terribly sad. Those years will not come back. The opportunity costs that students have paid will not come back. And that enormous amount of money may well be hanging over their heads if they've not done the kind of work that will get them a career that puts them in a position where they can earn that kind of money.
So do you see that colleges are returning to a foundational liberal arts education traditionally? I mean, did you see any of that kind of, what's the landscape nationwide from that perspective in your research?
I will say, and it is the most heartening part of our work, that slowly but surely we are seeing schools come forth and say we need to add a requirement. Not many yet, but I do believe that the tide is turning. We've seen schools tighten up science requirements. We've seen schools add econ requirements, add American history requirements. And this is a very gratifying change. And of course, it's 11th hour, as we know from studies of disruptive innovation, that American higher education has now got to show that it's worth the enormous amount that's been invested in it. When we look at the comparison charts of the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, we outspend every other developed nation in the world per pupil. And yet, as President Obama has properly and forcefully reminded us, we have some of the worst completion rates in the world. And we haven't even begun to discuss the metrics of what's really in those degrees. Are they high-quality degrees? So, the wake-up call has sounded very loudly. And one of the things that we really hope our study, What Will They Learn, will do is to get students and parents to make very good choices, to get policymakers, particularly trustees and regents, to take a long, hard look at what they're requiring of all students in their general education programs, in their core requirements, and to ensure that they're ready to leave, when they leave, ready for the challenges of a very dynamic, very challenging job market and the kinds of challenges they need to face as citizens in this nation.
Michael, can you share a little bit about the results? Like what type of schools, or even examples of schools that got an A rating? And was it mostly private schools or public schools?
There's really quite a good mix. Now, one of the things that I find very, very reassuring is that our U.S. military service academies have some of the best core curricula, not just where you might expect it in engineering, mathematics, and science, but every one of them requires a literature survey course. They regard this as one of the skills that helps a person about to become an officer understand communication and nuance and subtlety. They all have very firm expository writing requirements. They're very, very thoughtful about the way they put their core curricula together. We have a flagship public university in the University of Georgia that has an excellent core curriculum. And the University of Science and the Arts of Oklahoma, with an in-state tuition of barely $4,500 per year, that really has committed itself to the whole idea of a strong core that every student should take. We have two famous HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities, Morehouse and Clark Atlanta, that have A curricula. We have a number of small religious institutions, Thomas Aquinas, and not so small, University of Dallas in Texas, Bluefield College, that have A curricula. Colorado Christian has recently tightened up the science requirement to gain an A rating. That's to say all these things are within reach. They're not something that a university needs an enormous endowment to do. It needs will. It needs to have a community that comes together and really thinks hard about what it is that makes their degree useful, worthwhile, something that is worth that investment of time and money.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for sharing with us today all of your expertise and some more information about the report. Unfortunately, we're going to have to say goodbye but for the show, because we've come to the end of the show. But for everyone who's listening, we will have the What Will You Learn website available for you to take a look at. It's available on my website. It's also whatwilltheylearn.com. Thank you so much for joining us today, Michael.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Well, that wraps up another weekly show of College Smart Radio. We hope you picked up some new information today that helps you figure out ways to manage the runaway costs of college. You can hear us each week here at KDOW 1220 AM, Saturdays at 3 p.m. We promise to bring you up-to-date information from the front lines of helping parents deal with the most expensive years of their lives. For a link to a podcast of this show and our prior weekly show, go to our website, collegesmartradio.com. This is Beatrice Schultz. Thanks for tuning in to College Smart Radio. We look forward to sharing more helpful information with you next week.
You've been listening to College Smart Radio with certified financial planner Beatrice Schultz. If you have questions on today's topic, log on to collegesmartradio.com or call area code 650-587-1559. That's 650-587-1559. And join us next week at this time for another edition of College Smart Radio on AM 1220 KDOW.